תודה רבה לרביעת הסקסופונים של הקונסרבטוריום העירוני
The
של
saxophone
הרצליה,
quartet
שהם תמיד
of the
איתנו
Herzliya Music School who come to play for us every conference. They play the jazz piece by Scott Joplin, and thanks to them and their teacher. This year, the lottery organization organized a new project, launched a new project of reading poetry. It takes place all over the country, and it's designed to bring the beauty of Hebrew poetry to as many people as possible. Anyone dealing with space knows that it's about beauty and enjoyment, and poetry is very much the same. I'm honored to call actor and journalist Alex Ansky to read us a poem. I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
Good morning, everybody.
תודה רבה ושלום.
השיר שבחרנו להשמיע לכם
we're going to read to you is a very unique poem. It was written 118 years ago, and in many conferences it was thought of, was considered as a possible national anthem for Israel. However, for various reasons, Hatikvah was chosen. Yet this poem is being sung here in Israel. Even you people who were born in Israel must have sang it hundreds of times. And it was it was written 118 years ago, as we said, by Shaul Chernichovsky. It is read, I'm going to read it as it was written with the original accent, and it is a privilege for me to be part of this conference and speak to you in a kind of Hebrew that you don't speak anymore, yet understand every word of. It will be translated into English through the earphones, and you will be able to understand every word. It is called Creed, or Credo. Laugh at all my dreams, my dearest. Laugh, and I repeat anew that I still believe in man, as I still believe in you. By the passion of our spirit shall our ancient bonds be shed. Let the soul be given freedom. Let the body have its bread. For my soul is not yet sold to the golden calf of scorn, for I still believe in man and the spirit in him born. Life and love and strength and action in our heart and blood shall beat, and our hopes shall be both heaven and the earth beneath our feet. And in future I still believe, though it be distant, come it will, when nations shall each other bless, and peace at last the earth shall fill. my nation, it will live and love. It will accomplish all achievements. A generation in the land indeed lives on, not in the future, in the sky. Living in the spirit is not enough. This is the poem. Unfortunately, it can't be translated fully, of course. And as many people like to open sessions saying some quotes from the Bible or from poetry, is read out here on this very interesting day, the 30th of January. On January 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, and the question is, who won? And I think we are a living proof of who won. This day will be opened with a session to do with entrepreneurship, innovations and non-traditional applications of space. We're going to have two chairs. The first will be Professor Ehud Gazit, Chief Scientist at the Ministry of Science and Technology, and Dr. Tamar Yarom, from Deputy Head of Manor Division in Rafael.
Good morning. I will switch to English.
בוקר טוב, אני אדבר באנגלית לטובת אורחינו הנכבדים מכל רחבי העולם שהתקבצו כאן, ואני מאוד שמח לפתוח את המושב הזה יחד עם דוקטור תמר ירום. ואכן חדשנות
in the space research is a very important aspect, and space science, the study of those areas, is one of those frontiers that really are among those new areas that the human mind would like to conquer and establish. And indeed, space is opening the imagination for many researchers and non-professionals, and the study of science, the study of space science, is the combination of engineering and exact science, physics and chemistry and all other disciplines. We have a very distinguished list of presenters this morning, and I'm very happy to open with our first guest. It's Professor Wolter Peeters from the International Space University. Professor Peeters had his PhD in Industrial Organization from the Technical University of Delft at the Netherlands, and since then he's been with great achievements both in industry as well as in the academic world. He is currently Dean and Vice President in the University, International Space University, and I'm very happy to welcome Professor Peeters, please.
So thank you for the kind words, Professor Gazit. When I got this title from your colleagues, I don't know if we can switch it over. There is already the necessary logistics support. It put me through a little bit of a problem because, in fact, I know that in the room there are people knowing much more about it than I do as entrepreneurs, but I try to make something which is a little bit between for general public and for experts, so let that pass. The only thing I can hope is that I make you all equally unhappy with this speech. I don't think I can make somebody very happy. I have already my first issue here. I was told it would toggle. but it doesn't. Can somebody help here on the... Huh? This one? Oh, that's an unusual one. So I will try a little bit to say what I'm going to talk about, which area, show a few of the problems which many of you know, but maybe put them in a different light, and then look a little bit in some research that we were happy to have done in the past in the International Space University. Okay, where we're talking about is, in fact, if I use the cursor, is in fact this area. Let me explain a little bit what I wanted to show with that. In fact, in the space sector, we have two sectors who work in parallel. You have the government sector, whereby a government organization tells an organization, most of the time an agency or something else, what to do, and they do it using public money. That has been working for many, many years, but at a certain moment, the private space industry said, yeah, but wait a moment, I'm not going to wait until the government tells me what to do, I can do it myself. I'm not going to listen to policy issues, I'm going to listen to what the market wants. But if you do something that the market wants, of course you need money from the market, so you need private financing. Now that sector worked very well, I said, and in fact it is a safe sector. I mean, as many of you are from that sector, you know, working for the government, there is a problem. The government pays very bad. The government pays very late, but there's also one advantage. The government always pays. If you're working in the private sector, I worked in the private sector a lot before I came to ESA, 2 or 3 clients who don't pay can be catastrophic. So this worked very fine here as long as the point here, which is a little bit difficult with a pointer to show, the public financing continued to go. But the moment the public financing went a little bit down, people started to say, well, I have to keep my workforce, I have to keep my... And is the public sector financing going down? Well, just maybe because it's early in the morning, let me try to give something a little bit controversial. It has been made by, this direction, it has been made by a friend of mine from NASA, but as I thought Mr. Bolden could have been here, I left his name out of the view graphs, you never know. If you look at the expenditure of the NASA budget compared to the federal budget, it's very interesting. We can make nearly, if you look into current, so I'm talking economically about current money, you can virtually take a line through it. And if you extrapolate a line, which economists say never do it, but here we can do it, you will see that in the year 2030, the NASA budget will be 0. This is all theory, I agree. Well, the optimists say that maybe the budget will be infinite, but that's another mathematical way of looking at it. In any case, it will not be 0, let's be very honest, but it will reduce. So you will have more and more that shift, which is already taking place at the moment. And the shift is stronger than you think. If you look at one of the statistics, and I know there's a problem with statistics, there are different statistics, but I take one from the Space Foundation, the yearly space report from 2012. If you look at the different charts here and the different parts of this pie chart, you would be very surprised that worldwide, something like 75%, 75, that's 3/4 of the space activities are already in the commercial sector, already now. And it is still relatively growing. If I look, for instance, to give you an example how this is evolving, I will show you the European situation. In the year 2003, something like 1/3 of the space expenditure in Europe was commercial, 2/3 was governmental. Since then, over less than 10 years, the situation has changed and we are nearly at a 50-50 at the moment. And it is a trend that you see in every spacefaring nation. Of course, the first one, as it's more entrepreneurial, the first one being in America. Now, the question that I was asked by the organizers, which is not an easy one, is where would you recommend somebody who goes into the sector to put his capacity? Or where would you tell a young entrepreneur where is the money? It's clear, if you look at this, which is a European chart, I admit, if you look at this, the money is in the added value. So the money is in the services. So first advice I would say, go where the money is, try to position yourself there. There's also a second reason for that. With reducing public funding, the agencies will more and more have to limit themselves to research, development, look at launches. I'm not talking about commercial activities like our friends of SpaceX, which we'll talk later probably. But the governments have to keep the sector, the industrial sector. You heard Mr. Dordain yesterday, competitive and so on. So they have to keep the commercial sector first alive. So the added value, the downstream applications, they don't have money for. So they lean to a large extent to entrepreneurial people to go to the downstream applications. Now, if you say downstream applications, it sounds a little bit theoretical, and I don't want to be too theoretical. What are we talking about? I just take a snapshot, but I do it on purpose. In 2005, the OECD, which is the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, made a study about the future of space. I was a member of that study group, so I know the study pretty well. Now, why did I pick up that study? Not because I was a member of the study group, because it's from the OECD. So we're not talking about a group of space enthusiasts. We're talking about a group of people who are very relatively cool, looking at the economic effects, and have no passion for a certain sector. They are really looking at the numbers. They said, well, there could be, and this is now 7-8 years ago, a number of the sectors which we think are very interesting are in the field of telecommunication, where there they looked in particular into what we call now more e-health than telehealth. And in fact, just to make a small publicity, we will have a symposium in ISU on it in March. For those who are interested, you can pick up a leaflet at the stand. So what are we talking about e-health? We're talking about an older generation, older people who want to still travel, but want to be followed medically. They're also talking about upstream. If you're able to send signals up and not only receive in telecommunication, the world, well, as we say, the limit is the sky. You can do a lot of things. You could do video on call. You can do a lot of interactive actions with the telecommunication satellite. Earth observation, we talked about it. I don't have to dwell onto it. There was yesterday there was a lot of emphasis on it. Navigation, also that is something which we know that there is a potential. I'm not going to the traditional ones. In the meantime, by the way, and in particular in China, there is a lot of interest in the return signal, what we call GNSS-R, and you can do a lot with that signal. There are some studies saying that you could predict tsunamis with the navigation. You could look at the meteor. You can do a lot of things besides positioning with that signal. And now space tourism I'm not going to dwell on because I know that there are a number of experts talking after me on that, so that is a very obvious one. What are now the problems? If you're a young entrepreneur, what are the problems? The problem is that if you want to come into the space sector, you have to be already relatively high on the chain of technology readiness. If you launch a car, I'll take a very easy example. Of course, you can risk that the car has a problem and you call it back after a while. So you do something on that car. It's very difficult to call a satellite back, if not to say impossible. So you have to be sure that whatever you're launching at least is 5 or 6 before you can start talking to the market. And that is a problem. Why? Due to the financing. These are not imaginary figures. What I have here are figures which are taken from an auditing firm. You can see the reference maybe. And in fact, they found out, looking at the number of new entrepreneurial enterprises in space, most of the companies, it takes them 3 years before they start making profit, contrary to the business-to-business market, or the consumer market. Now, that is the first misunderstanding for the young people here in the room. If you are starting to make profit, that's the worst part of your life. It sounds contradictory, but that's where you are at the deepest of your equity. Because it means before you only spend. So you have been spending and spending for many years, and that's the point downstairs where you said, okay, now the curve is going into the other direction. The point that really would interest you later is, when do I reach my initial equity curve? When do I break even? To say it in a very simple way. And that, unfortunately, in the space sector is in the order of 6 or 7 years, which is very long. And here, a number of things go wrong, obviously. Because most of the young people do not think in terms of this long term, and they underestimate the money that they will need to come to that point. In fact, most of the time, sad to say so, a lot of them are bankrupt before they reach that point. So you need already from the beginning on enough cash to survive these first 6 or 7 years. Where do you find that cash? First point, I have to disappoint you. Debt financing, which we call banks in more polite term. Debt financing you can forget. If you go to the bank and you says, I'm from the space sector, I have a brilliant idea, you're standing outside before you know it. They don't need brilliant ideas. Debt financing, not in the beginning. So you go through this chain of people which you can find, and there we're lucky in the space sector, because the first group of people that you will find, like business angels or high net worth individuals, are people who may give money because they are relatively passionate about it. There would have been no space tourism development now if we didn't have the Paul Allens and the Bezos and other people, or the Elon Musks, who are, of course, they want to have their money back, but they are also passionate about space. And that's why you can convince them to invest in space. The venture capitalists, of course, are the people who will look at it from a more technological, technical and analytical point of view, and they are coming later. And that's an important message also. When do I go to which of these people? Not too early, certainly not for debt financing. This is a little bit of a risky curve, you can discuss it. My feeling is, in the beginning, if you absolutely have no profit yet, you have no chance then put your own money in it or find a business angel. It's only when you start to make a little bit of profit that you can call the venture capitalists in. Private equity, late. They have to see already that you're close to your initial equity break-even point, or they're not interested. And as I said, debt financing, forget it in the beginning. You cannot go to a bank with a space project in the beginning. Bad news, I must admit, is that, I just said it as a side remark, venture capital is not so much available anymore. It's not like in the internet bubble times in the year 2000. We're talking about at least one order of magnitude less venture capital on the market than then. It was going up a little bit around 2007, but unfortunately then what the Americans called the first crash started, and a double dip in 2011, so we still are not there. It's all a little bit theoretical. Let me point out only one case. There are books written out of it, but this is one case I know a little bit better than other cases, because unfortunately there were a number of my alumni involved in this. At a certain moment, people had a very good idea, a German group of engineers. They says, we're going to transport very heavy pieces via cargo airships, what we call also Zeppelins in the common thing. So they brought up a business plan which was quite clever and quite convincing. They said, well, you have these enormous big pieces that you cannot do over road transport. If we have a relatively big airship, we can carry them maximum 3,000 kilometers, which is already a lot, and we can carry pieces up to 160 tons. That business model was so attractive that immediately they got something like $320 million, euro. It was Deutschmark at that time, but so they started working on it. One of the biggest things that they needed, which you see there on the right, is an hangar. So they built a very big hangar. They started to do test flights with their Zeppelins. Everything went so fine that 3 years later, in 1999, they were even, the ministers were there, I think even the Prime Minister was there in Germany. They were given the name of the biggest entrepreneur of the year. They got all the honors. They had made one mistake, one little mistake. They had promised that they would be operational by the year 2000, and they were not. And by the year 2000, when they were not operational, the finances went away. 2001, they tried to add a bank loan, didn't work. In 2002, they were bankrupt. So if you are making a business plan, make sure that you ask enough money from the beginning. This is a very typical example of something which 320 million euro went through the drain, in fact. A few years ago, we did a study on what the venture capitalists would like to know from a business plan. That's not easy to know, because they keep their secrets very close to themselves. Now, luckily, we have in ISU a number of venture capitalists, so we have some access. And the same thing always comes out. If you ask the venture capitalist, what do you want to know if you see a business plan, and what don't you find there, they always say the same. The people do not have enough studied the market and the competitors. They have a brilliant idea, but what are the markets, what are the competitors? And then, what I showed you before, underestimation of time to market. Every person, every student who comes in with a plan to me says, I will make profit in 6 months. No, you don't make profit in 6 months. So they ask not enough money. So I can turn this around, and we turn the question around. So what do you want to see, in fact, in a business plan? If I show you a business plan from one of the students, the first thing you should not forget is give your idea as fast as possible. You will be shocked by it, but most of the venture capitalists are only spending 4 to 5 minutes until they decide if a business plan is worth looking further or not. And then it goes into the waste bin. So it has to be attractive from the beginning onwards. Understand the market and understand the funding needs. Ask certainly enough money. I'm just taking the rest of the some of the details we got from this survey, because you will find them nowhere, they are not published. We had a few other questions that we asked the venture capitalists. Is, first of all, where do you like to meet the youngsters, or the youngsters who are here in the room? Surprise to us was a little bit that they said we want to meet them personally. And that's why we started a number of these shows and meeting places in Europe. If you were asked them how much do you want to finance, you always get the same answer. I hope they ask enough money. One expressed it, which is an expression you may have heard. One said, if you want to ask for peanuts, you only get monkeys. So you have to. They don't want to give 5,000 there, 10,000 there. That's too much administration. So if you go to a venture capitalist, ask enough money from the beginning, realistically, but ask enough money. And also, do not go too late. The venture capitalist wants to see you very, very early. He wants to get in before you are popular, because if you're popular, you know your market price, and it's not so attractive for him anymore. So he wants to see you early. Okay, for the last minute, I'm going to do something risky, and I'm pretty sure that in 10 years, when there is another Ilan Ramon event, I will not be there anymore, so I can risk it probably. What is going to happen now? This is the speculation, of course. So let me try to look a little bit forward. I expect that the next few years public funding is still going down, because we're not out of it. In Europe, we had very nice speeches from the different people, but the reality is money is still going down for 2-3 years probably before we're out of the financial crisis. We have the euro crisis in Europe and so on. So the agencies will be more and more forced to do research, development, and new developments, because that's what, in fact, they should do. And with a limited number of money that they have available, that's what they will, even more than before, specialize in, leaving the other companies working on the downstream applications. A bit of a risky prediction here is that risk capital, in my personal opinion, will become available soon again. The reason is that venture capitalists, private equity firms, they're always in advance of economic development. That means they 2 or 3 years before the economy goes, they say, this is the right moment to go. So I guess you will see them coming up to the market 2015, 2016. The markets will get a little bit more open. We heard it yesterday from the NASA people. There is clearly a wish from the Obama administration, if you're talking about the biggest spacefaring nation, to open ITAR, to relax ITAR. This will be certainly coming up. 2 things which every investor will have to, entrepreneur will have to take into account, is that there will be more and more emphasis on space debris. Also, so in particular if you go for small satellites, and there will be more and more emphasis on having green space, green propellant and so on. As I said, these predictions are very risky, but I didn't want to leave this room without at least leaving some legacy, as yesterday has been said so many times. So thank you for your attention.
Morning. My name is Tami Yarom from Rafael. Rafael does very varied things in the area of space, as you can see in the tent, and also in the lecture you'll hear this afternoon. In any case, I would like to introduce Meir Chen, who will be speaking to us about Towards Unified Satellite Architecture. Meir is the manager of future technologies in Mabat Space of the IAI, and after that he worked in the Defense Ministry, in the Air Force with UAVs and space technologies. Meir has 2 academic degrees from the Hebrew University, a BSc in Physics and Electronics, and an MSc in Atmospheric Studies. He also received the Israel Defense Prize. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present. I would like to talk about where we're going to be getting with satellite architecture. Yesterday we were presented as a company that finds it difficult to innovate and renew, and I hope that this will be the first response to that challenge. So let's get started. In order to get to the future, we have to start in the past. So let's start with the basics. The first was an observation satellite, a small satellite, which was basically a camera, and that was the central axis of the satellite. And around the camera, we set up all the avionics and accessories. So we had a small, compact satellite that can be very quick. And that was the basis for the satellites Eros A and B. And from there we moved on to, and that was about in the year 2000, to a generic bus configuration, which is the basis for all our new satellites, with Texar, the basis for Venus, and UpSat 3000, that satellite that we are currently manufacturing for the Italians. The generic bus is a completely different approach. It is a hexagon in shape into which we compressed all the avionics, and that enables us to obtain all the different kinds of sensors. Without getting into the details, Texar, a radar satellite, and we also had an optical satellite on the same bus. And that enabled us to offer the same construction for LIMSAT or Ultracet, which was discussed yesterday. For those who weren't here, this is a system for detecting UV transits like supernovas, and this should detect the beginning of the event and send it to sensors on Earth that will follow the event. You can see it on the right. And here we're talking about a satellite that weighs less than 400 kilos on an orbit of 20 kilometers, a circular orbit. We attach the Bigon system, which is connected to the Inmarsat system. And here you can see the great advantage of the generic bus. It can take any kind of sensor. You can see from the diagram, it has the LOP sensor, which is a unique sensor. It also is attached on the same bus. We haven't changed much of the architecture, just with very small adaptations. It's the same construction as the previous ones. In the Geo Satellites, it was a little bit different, but not very different. We started with a small chassis built by the AI, and it was the basis for the EMOS 1 and 2 satellites, and for 4 and 6 we moved from small-sized satellites to mid-sized satellites. We're talking about a few tons of weight that can serve many addressees with 5 to 10 kilowatts. Here you can see the central pipe and the construction, and this is what will take us into the future with Amos 7 and so on. So we have a generic bus, and the question is, how do we move on from here? So we have defined two processes. One is short-term and the other is short-term. We're talking about reusing various content words, Geo, Leo, and so on. And the second phase involves new architecture based on new designs. So what are we doing in the short term? We're doing reuse. In other words, if we have developed a computer for our observation satellites, there's no reason in the world that we shouldn't use it for the Geo satellites as well, with the relevant adaptations, or alternatively derive from it and use it for cloud satellites. And the same thing with if I have a working, mature capacity system, then I can use it for other satellites as well, and so on and so forth. And that enables us to get a nano satellite with mature systems, and we can talk about a 5-year mission in space, because we have the support systems that can hold it for that time, that can support a wide variety of sensors. In the picture you can see the format of a CubeSat. I'm not sure that that is the format that we will preserve, but at present we are aiming for a similar format. And then we have a satellite with a new computer with a capacity system that has already been tested in other satellites, an experienced GPS system, batteries that have flown, that flew with the Texar mission. It is a satellite in every way. It's small, but it is a satellite. And here you can see the configuration of the capacity systems, CPU-DU, and in the middle you see the CPU, and this is in the CubeSat format. The next phase is for the more distant future, and it talks about a completely new configuration, which involves two things: the concentration of all the control activities of the satellite in one mounting. And this becomes a satellite with two main boxes: the main computer that handles all the possible digital activity, and it will be the front end. It'll have a GPS antenna, a sensor, all the calculations that were required and were once done in the GPS box or in the star following box. This will all be done in the main processor. The opposite the payload, there will be the other system that does the main processing. All this will be done in that box where the payload is, and that saves me boxes, and I bring the data processing capability to space. I lower weight, increase integration, and so on. What do I have in my toolbox to do this? I have the GR712RC, which is a code name for the Leon 3 based Kuiper, which the I was involved in the development of, and the basis for the data processing is called RC64, and I'll talk more about that later. So the Leon 3 already exists. What you see on the right side is the format of the remote sensor computer, and on the left, that is the format for the nano satellite. It is not a diagram. This is an actual photograph. I won't get in to all the specifications of the Leon 3. It has a very high capacity, and it has all the advantages that it requires. The RC64 is a completely new animal. It doesn't exist yet. We want to participate in its development. It will have 64 cores, a very strong machine, but on the other hand, low power capacity and adapted for space use. And here it comes. This is the programming of a card based on the 64 cores, and there is a controller on the bottom for this card. With a card of this kind, I can start talking about space processing. What we do today on Earth for optical and other information, we can now do in space. We can start thinking of new applications and capabilities that we didn't have until now. Here are some examples. All possible radar processing will be able to go to digital SAR, and this is the basis for this. It can design beams, something that wasn't possible until now. This can be done with the RC64. Hyperspectral processing. This wasn't possible in space before. Until now, it's been done on Earth, and there is a program led by LOP, and this will be the first, and this will bring us to new places. And this is regarding remote applications, but there's also the matter of communications. This slide describes our roadmap for communications headquarters. We're talking about a different content world. But if you don't understand, let me explain. Amos 1, 2, 3 are MenPipes satellites. In other words, they transmit exactly what they see. And then this track is what is important here. The satellite receives and it's sent out, and then you get your yes television programming. Amos 4 is a whole different ball game, and then this brings us to Channel Lifer, the future payloads that we all want to reach, and we're already seeing the beginnings of this, like the ARIS payload. These are payloads that detect the signal and manipulate the signal, add or subtract, add content, and so on. And for that, you need modulation and demodulation in the satellite itself. And we can continue with the dream and get to an IP router in space, which would be part of a very broad Earth network, a satellite network. But if we have an RC64, we can fantasize about a configuration that does exactly the same roadmap I showed you a moment ago. And this would be the case for Leon and RC64. So what do we have here? We started with two complete different content words: remote centers with the generic bus, and the Amos with their bus. And in these two content worlds, we reach the state where we have the generic bus, but the content worlds don't talk to one another. And we are now involved in a reuse process of connecting the content worlds and realizing all the experience that we have. We are aiming for a unified co-avionic box and a lot of processing going on in space. And to show and to explain that we're not just showing slides I can tell you that in the past month, Mabat Space pledged to the chief scientist that it would participate in the funding of RC64. We hope that we will get the relevant components and the planning of what and how to do, and we're actually starting right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. הדובר הבא שלנו הוא ברי
Senior Vice President for Commercial and Business Development of SpaceX. I think that our first speaker mentioned the way to go from space research to entrepreneurial and raising funding from venture capitalists. SpaceX is a very interesting example on the way that you combined commercial activities in the field of spacecrafts and other space activities. Barry Matsumori holds the BC in Business from Arizona State University and a Master's in Electrical Engineering from the University of Arizona. And he will tell us today about SpaceX Dragon spacecraft, which I think it's a very interesting way you can take commercial activities into this field, very exciting field of space studies. Please.
So we're going to do something a little unusual, and that's there's two of us, Garrett and I, that will be presenting. And so hopefully you'll enjoy that. We're going to cover a lot of territory here. So, oh, we do have a wireless mic. Excellent. So, Garrett, you want to go ahead and get started? Well, you know what? If you yell in this, it works.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for bearing with us as we do this tag team. Reason we decided to split this presentation is that together, combined, Barry and I, we're the height of a normal person. So we teamed up.
You can't insult me.
Is that working? No? Okay. So what we would like to do is give you an overview of what's happening today at SpaceX, and in specific, what we're doing with the Dragon spacecraft. So this year, we had a lot of work with our Dragon spacecraft for cargo missions, and since it was also the proper time in the Chinese calendar, we refer to it as the Year of the Dragon. And so, but before I talk to you about SpaceX, I'd like to say a few words. First of all, everything we've done at SpaceX to date with the Dragon has been the result of something very interesting, which deviates a little bit from the pure private sector venture capitalist model that was discussed. This is a public-private partnership. So we've been partnering with NASA, and it's been a great confluence of the know-how and experience and lessons learned that NASA brings to the table, along with the private sector innovation and some also leveraging private funding that SpaceX brings to the table. So as a result, we've had great success working together with NASA, and we're going to tell you more about that. But first, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Ilan Ramon. So before I came to SpaceX, I worked at NASA. I was a NASA astronaut. And back in 1998, I came in for some training on the space shuttle. And there, sitting in my classroom, was a new student. And our instructor said to us, "We have somebody for you to meet. This is Colonel Ilan Ramon from Israel, and he is going to be the first Israeli astronaut." And I was overjoyed because here he was joining our class, and this was an opportunity not only for something historic, but as a Jew living in America, I had a lot of pride seeing that the first Israeli astronaut was joining me in our astronaut endeavors. So he studied with us, and you can see in this next slide, that's from our training in a zero-gravity aircraft. There's Ilan Ramon. That's me down there at the bottom. And yes, that is my Tickle Me Elmo doll, which we had a lot of fun with. So we trained together, and we went on from there. And ever since the accident, I've been getting to know. I got to know the family when they first came to United States and to Houston. And since the accident, I've gotten to know much better the family, and especially Rona, who's with us today. And it's been a real privilege to work with the Ramon family. The family is a national treasure to the state of Israel. So I went on and did 2 space flights. The first one was a 95-day mission up to the space station on the Space Shuttle Endeavour, and then my second one was on Atlantis. So I like to refer to myself as a recovering astronaut. And then something interesting happened, and that is I saw amazing things happening in the private sector in the United States. I saw, while I was still at NASA, the first flight of the Dragon spacecraft. And in fact, the day that Dragon spacecraft flew 2 orbits around the Earth and landed, I was flying a NASA T-38 training aircraft, and I landed at Edwards Air Force Base. And when the Air Force lineman came to service the jet, he looked at the tail of the jet, and he saw the NASA symbol. And he said, "Hey, congratulations today on that awesome flight of the Dragon." And my first reaction was, well, that wasn't really NASA, that was SpaceX that did that. But then I remembered, no, this is a public-private partnership, and I quickly took all the credit. And I said, "Thank you very much. I designed it myself. I'm glad you liked it." But I saw something fascinating was happening in the private sector. I saw all this innovation occurring, and I saw a promise for a new golden age in space. And I wanted to be part of that. So I did something very difficult, which is I voluntarily left the astronaut office and I came to SpaceX. So SpaceX was founded in 2002. When I joined SpaceX 2 years ago, I was employee number 1,075. Today we have over 3,000 employees. So I am an old-timer at SpaceX, and I've only been there for 2 years. That's how fast we are growing. We have about 1 million square feet of facilities in California. Most of our work is all done under this one roof where we have all of our professional staff, our manufacturing, our command and control, and a lot of our testing. We also have a 600-acre site in Central Texas. It turns out in Los Angeles they get very upset if you make a lot of fire and smoke and noise in the middle of the city. So we go to Texas where they don't mind at all. And there we test all of our rocket engines. And then we have a launch pad at the Cape. And we have a launch pad that we're about to start launching from in Vandenberg. As far as the business goes, we are still privately owned. Elon Musk there is our founder, but we have a lot of seasoned executives like Barry, and that are leading the company that have both experience in aerospace, but also we leverage expertise in other industries, which I think is one of the true strengths of the company. We have over $4 billion in backlog orders on our manifest, and we've been profitable since 2007. So life has been pretty good at SpaceX. We have a bunch of different customers, including U.S. government, international government, and then 65% by missions are commercial missions. We are AS9100 certified, and if you want to see our prices, just go to SpaceX.com. And let's see, with that, I'd like to turn it over to Barry to talk to you a little bit more about the Dragon.
Okay. What I'll do is spend a few slides. I'm not sure what's better to do here. I think this works just fine. So I'll spend a few minutes to talk about why it's been the year of the Dragon for us. And this slide kind of encompasses a lot of it, because what you see is 2 individuals teaming together, two organizations teaming together, providing leadership and a number of traits that came together between the 2 teams to allow that Dragon spacecraft to go up, come back down, be recovered for cargo to the space station. So we'll talk a bit more about that. Just a short history of the Falcon 9 launch vehicle. You see 4 different flights starting from 2010 and then moving on to our latest one in October of last year. And then on top of that, you see, let's see if this is going to fire up. You'll see 3 of the Dragon spacecraft that went up and were recovered. So, by the way, all of those, if you come to SpaceX, you can see them. We've recovered them, refurbished them, safed them, and have them either in Los Angeles or in Texas. Our product line, we currently have the Falcon 9 with the capsule, with the Dragon capsule. We have the Falcon 9 with a 5.2 meter fairing. So that's for our commercial customers. putting satellites into that fairing and then deploying them in space. And we're in the middle of developing something called the Falcon Heavy. That is 3 Falcon 9 cores tied together, and that's providing, to give you a metric, we're conservatively rating about 13,000 kilograms to geostationary transfer orbit. That's a fair, there is no spacecraft on the planet right now that big. It is the largest space launch vehicle short of a Saturn V that's been developed recently. So it's very large. And then, of course, the Dragon capsule. All right. What makes SpaceX is unique in a number of ways. One of them that is very unique is how much we are vertically integrated in our supply chain. So you'll see in the diagram, we build our own engines, tanks, structures. Of course, that's kind of natural for a launch service provider to do. Avionics, we do our own avionics, including flight computers and software. All of the software for not only flight, but also for ground. We have our test facilities in Texas, and those are developed all by us. And then the launch sites that we develop. We've taken existing pads, refurbished them with our own equipment. So what you see as a company, when we have discussions, let's say, between a structural engineer and a propulsion engineer, what typically doesn't happen is we get a hold of a subcontracts manager and ask that we have discussions between 2 engineers. We simply walk from a cubicle here to the cubicle next door or down the hall or upstairs and have a technical discussion, and it's transparent. That's one of the reasons why we've been able to work very effectively, high quality, yet rapidly. I won't spend much time on this slide. We have a fair backlog. This represents, in a summary form, a little short of 50 flights that we have backlog on. So we have a fair amount of business that our number one challenge now is execution, getting the job done. So the theme of this presentation was Year of the Dragon, and we'll talk a little bit about what made that Year of the Dragon. And as Garrett talked earlier, this partnership with NASA and SpaceX made it all possible. What's this partnership mean in a little more detail? We have this commercial program of launch services and delivery being contracted by NASA that is quite different for what's been done typically in the industry. And what happened is both parties had to learn a lot about how this relationship was going to work. We certainly looked at past practices and modified them, but we also wanted to see what do we want to retain that's actually a good way to do it. I can say that for SpaceX, we learned a lot from NASA on their flight experience, on their ways to ensure that you have a reliable mission. As a design team, SpaceX put together the Falcon 9 rocket. We had the Dragon capsule, and we did all those things to make that work. NASA established the ground rules of how, as we progress the mission, when can we go ahead? They also did things like, before we ever went into space, tons of simulations and verifications to ensure that, in fact, we were ready to go into space. So here we are with this space mission. We go up, and step by step, as we progress, NASA will provide gates saying, you're ready to go? You're not ready to go. Fortunately, for the last 2 missions, we pass those gates and we move forward, whether it's 2.5 kilometers from space station and going ahead and getting it within proximity of space station, to the authorization to go ahead and berth with space station, taking that last step from 30 meters to 10 meters to be grappled by the robotic arm and then brought into space station. So the one way you can characterize this was a team sport. We had to work well, be well coordinated with each other in order for this to all work, and it obviously did. So what was it? In 2012, we had the COTS 2+ mission, which was the mission for the first private company to go to International Space Station, deliver cargo, also load up cargo, and return to Earth and bring that cargo back to NASA. So it was, we call it 2+ because there was 2 stages to the mission. First was a flyby around space station outside of the safe zone, and then going within the safe zone within that zone to actually berth with space station. The second event, the one that marked the true commercial relationship between NASA and SpaceX, was CRS-1, and that was the one we did on 7 October. That was to take more cargo to space station. One of the cargoes, by the way, if you caught it, that we took because we had a little refrigerator inside Dragon was fresh ice cream, chocolate vanilla swirl to be specific. For the astronauts, it's a treat to actually get something that's not hydrated. So, and one other thing I want to point out, Soyuz had brought up some astronauts in the middle of it. This is not going to point, but you see that red circle up there? That was the Dragon. That was an infrared image of Dragon being attached to space station when Soyuz came up to deliver some astronauts. So it's kind of an interesting picture. All right, and also on that mission, we had some experiments from Israel, from some students that brought up, that was inside the Dragon capsule, brought it to space station, and then returned back to Earth. And that's what the students are showing there. Actually, I think Garrett met with those students earlier this week. All right, with that, we're going to do a quick video from that mission. Yeah, audio. Yeah, let's see if the audio's up. Try it again. Sorry?
I think they're working on it backstage.
Oh, that's what he said?
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
There you go.
Got it.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket, launching Dragon to the International Space Station and returning cargo resupply missions to U.S. soil.
Houston, station on 2, capture complete. Looks like we've tamed the Dragon. We're happy she's on board with us.
So if you're not aware, that's recovered off the coast of California, about 100 miles offshore. And the recovery accuracy for us is pretty amazing. So that ship does not take very long to go by and pick up the capsule. And the other thing that we're here for is to definitely celebrate that that Spacecom and SpaceX are working together on the Amos 6 satellite that we will be launching in 2015, and we're really excited to do that, and working closely with IAI as well as Spacecom on this program. So this is a really good reason for us to be here and celebrate this event with our partners there. So thanks very much for that. Yeah. And with that, Garrett.
Okay. Actually, if you could bring the slides back up, we just want to conclude with a little bit of an update on our commercial crew. So I'll wrap this up quickly, but I'm here to tell you that SpaceX, we're very proud of the work we're doing launching satellites, and we're very proud of the success we've had this year with delivering cargo to the International Space Station. But the company, to be honest, was not founded to bring T-shirts and food and water and other supplies to space. The company was founded to bring people to space. Our founder, Elon Musk, wants human life to be multiplanetary, and that's the whole reason for our existence at SpaceX. So my job is to convert this rocket, the Falcon 9 and the Dragon spacecraft, to carry not cargo but to carry people. And this is actually fairly easy because from the very beginning the company intended to do this. So about a year and a half ago, we got a contract with NASA for $75 million to start working on the change from the cargo carrying capability to carrying people. And so what we focused on were the things we need to do differently for people. The biggest thing was the launch abort system. We want an ejection capability, something we did not have in shuttle, so that if the Falcon 9 rocket is having a bad day, the Dragon with the crew inside can get to safety. So we started building the engine and all the components for the propulsion system, but we also looked at other things that the crew needs, including seats, life support systems, space suits, all those types of things that cargo obviously does not need. Finally, we did a lot of analyses and homework to make sure that our design was going in the right direction, and then we brought NASA astronauts to SpaceX to check out our crew cabin and make sure the human factors were satisfactory. So there you see some of the things we did. On the upper left, we have the crew cabin. You can see that we have 2 levels of seating. The top level is first class. We have the engine there in the middle, which is a 17,000-pound hydrogen engine that will be used only for aborts, but we also plan to use it for landing because it's a pusher system, not a tractor, so we bring it home and reuse it. We did a bunch of CFD. We looked at how we're going to modify the pad. We worked on life support equipment, and in the bottom right, we started building spacesuits. So that was what we did for the first year and a half with NASA. Then we won a much bigger contract, $440 million, and that's to work in the commercial crew program under the CC ICAP. And during this time, up between now and May 2014, we're going to focus on 4 things. First, we're going to complete the design of the crew vehicle all the way through the critical design review. Secondly, we're going to do some massive hardware testing to ensure the vehicle is safe and the design is sound. And the biggest 2 tests that we're going to do, one of them is depicted in the background there. We're actually going to take the Dragon on the top of a Falcon 9, launch it, and at the point of maximum drag, which is in a transonic regime near the point of maximum dynamic pressure, we're going to separate the Dragon using the abort system and demonstrate that we can bring the crew to safety. Finally, I keep talking about safety, and I want to say just a close, especially when it comes to flying crew. As I mentioned in the very beginning, I was very close to the events that transpired 10 years ago this week, and while at the same time I want to make sure that we develop a vehicle, and I guarantee we will be developing a vehicle that will be orders of magnitude more safe than any vehicle that has taken people to space before. At the same time, we cannot just, the safest vehicle is one that never leaves the ground. And so it would be a dishonor to the memories of our crewmates of STS-107 if we stopped here. Since for over a year now, the United States of America does not have the ability anymore to launch people into space. I am not happy about that. I don't think anybody at NASA is happy about that. But NASA and SpaceX together are going to do something about that, and in just a few short years, we'll be putting Americans and our partners internationally back into space on American rockets. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for the very interesting and inspiring presentation. So we moved from commercial activities to business and to pleasure, even leisure, as the next speaker is Steve Isaacson, who's the Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at Virgin Galactic, which is into space tourism. So it's really moving from business to pleasure and the business of pleasure and leisure. Steve was appointed as United States Department of Energy Chief Financial Officer in 2007, and he is also a former Deputy Associate Administrator of NASA from 2002 and 2005, and today he will tell us about the another new and very inspiring and intriguing activity of Virgin Galactic. Steve, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction. Before I start in my presentation, I'd actually want to open with two comments. Seeing yesterday's presentation got me thinking about where I was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was at NASA. I remember it was a beautiful night. It was the night before the launch of Columbia. I happened to be at the Cape, and I happened to have the honor to be there with the Israeli delegation as we went out the night before the Columbia launch. And it was a spectacularly beautiful evening. Spotlights were on the shuttle, and I just have an absolutely vivid memory of sort of what a absolutely beautiful and optimistic night that was. I was there the next day when we saw the launch, an incredible launch. It was about as flawless as one could have at least observed it. Soon after the launch, I returned to Washington, D.C., and was sort of finishing up negotiations at that time with the White House. You heard yesterday how the International Space Station had some very rough years, and I was concluding some negotiations on budget and management plans for the space station. And I recall having concluded those negotiations, and I went to Sean O'Keefe, who you also heard from yesterday, was the NASA administrator then. And I said, Sean, you know, terrific news. We've just concluded negotiations with the White House. I think finally we have the budget to finish off the space station. And I think for the first time in many, many years, we could start thinking beyond the space station and start thinking about what comes next. That was a Friday. On Saturday was the Columbia accident. Now, at that time, I thought that everything I had mentioned to Sean was certainly going to go away. But it was very interesting. Two things actually came out of that accident, which to me personally is the deeper legacy of what happened that tragic day. I think it's something that people don't think about when they think about Ilan Ramon's flight. I think what they think about is how the shuttle was made safer after that. But actually what happened, at the same time we were trying to get the shuttle back flying, NASA, working with the White House, came up with a new policy in terms of where NASA should be going. And a document was released 2 years later called A Renewed Spirit of Discovery. And it actually truly was instigated by really thinking through where NASA should be going in the future. Well, one of the things that came from it was a declaration that NASA should extend human presence across the solar system, Moon, Mars, and other destinations. And a lot of what you heard about yesterday is that sort of international undertaking to explore. The other thing that probably was not as well known about it is also in the document that was released was a direction to pursue commercial opportunities for providing transportation and other services supporting the International Space Station. And directly from that came out the ideas of what you just heard prior to me from SpaceX and other companies that are now pursuing it. I wanted to highlight that because I think these are two things we don't think about with the Columbia, but in fact it's directly related to that tragic day. Second thing before I get into my presentation is just on a personal note. I'm actually the son of 2 Holocaust survivors. My father was a survivor from Auschwitz. My mother was a hidden child. My father always taught me to work hard and never give up, and my mother always taught me to dream. I don't think when they grew up in their small villages in Eastern Europe, they ever would imagine that they'd have their son standing here in the state of Israel addressing this distinguished group. I also think they had never imagined that they'd have a son in space exploration. And I think space travel is the common language of dreams. And in fact, before I get into my presentation, something I always like to ask the audience is, so how many people sitting out there today, by raise of hands, would like to go to space? Terrific. You can see me afterwards. I got tickets to sell. Well, to get it started, I want to play a short videotape, if we could tee that up on the screen. Just to let you know that Richard Branson, my boss, you'll have a chance to hear from him on sort of what inspired him to want to pursue what we're trying to do at Virgin Galactic. So let's go ahead.
I'd seen the moon landing as a young boy, and I just thought, one day, I'm going to do that. But years by year went by, and NASA didn't seem to be that interested in getting you or me into space. And so in about 1990, I suddenly thought, Virgin Galactic sounds like a good name. And so having registered the name Virgin Galactic, I had to do something about it. To be perfectly honest, I think it would be very sad for anybody not to want to go to space. I mean, if you're inquisitive about life and inquisitive about the world around us, most of what's around us is space. And just to be able to look back at our fragile Earth from space and see the beauty of it is something that I'm sure that every single one of us would love to do if we had the opportunity.
Well, hopefully that got you in the mood for the fun and inspiration that we're hoping to achieve at Virgin Galactic. Let me, in the remaining time, sort of walk through where we are as a program as we get ready to undertake this new venture. Our vision is to be the truly first commercial space line. Just as there are airlines today for people to travel, we want to provide the opportunity for anybody who wants to go to have the experience of space. All of this was inspired almost 10 years ago from what was X Prize, a prize competition to demonstrate the ability to take people into space and bring it back. At that time, there was an engineer who's considered among the best in the United States, Burt Rutan, who came up with this concept and actually won the prize through a vehicle called Spaceship One. Richard Branson, who's always had a flair for undertaking inspirational efforts, had taken notice of this, and he took notice of this as a result of many of his other undertakings. He's been known to balloon long distances and try many things. One of the things that was going on at the time was called the Virgin Global Flyer, which was a vehicle that was designed and helped built by Burt Rutan as a vehicle that was going to be solo around the world. And in his discussions with Burt Rutan, he learned about what was going on in spaceship, which allowed him to fulfill the dream you just heard in the video of providing the world's first space line. There's three reasons, I believe, that really excite people to want to go to the space. Number one is simply the view from space. You saw some spectacular pictures yesterday from NASA Administrator Charlie Bolden. I think anybody who's gone, like Garrett and others, will tell you how truly inspirational it is to see a borderless planet and the beautiful blue marble. The second is, of course, the fun and excitement of just floating, having the experience of weightlessness. And third is just the exhilaration of the ride. I mean, it's an incredible feeling to be pulling 3 Gs as you go up, and 6 Gs as you return, and to have the powerful acoustics of a rocket motor that's sitting only 10 feet behind you, taking you up into space. Let me tell you a little bit about our vehicles. We have 2 vehicles that we're developing. One is the White Knight 2. It's an aircraft, quite unusual looking, a dual fuselage design. On one side, the right side, is where we have 2 pilots. On the left side is a compartment that's available for future training as we prepare people to become future astronauts. The other vehicle is called Spaceship. Spaceship 2, being Spaceship 1 was the one that, of course, was used to win the prize. It's a vehicle that provides for 2 pilots and 6 passengers. The White Knight carries it up to about an altitude of 50,000 feet, releases it, and then for a little over a minute, we have a rocket motor that would propel you straight up to an altitude of about 100 kilometers. When the motor shuts off, there's an opportunity to take your seatbelt off, float around the cabin. There's lots of windows specifically designed in the spaceship, so everyone has an opportunity to look back towards the Earth, to float around. And then when the time is up, you have to return everyone to their seat, which is going to be really interesting to get everyone back to their seat. Have them strap their seatbelt on, and then come in for a glided landing. Right now, we're completing some of the ground tests. This is a picture of the rocket motor. We've been doing a number of tests to enhance the reliability of what we're going to be flying on a human-rated system. We do our assembly in Mojave, California. It's about an hour north of Los Angeles. Like Texas, it's one of those places where entrepreneurs can go and try new things. Right now, we're in the flight testing where we have done a number of glide flights, where, as you saw in the video and is shown here, we're testing the spaceship for landing and approach. In the picture here, you can actually see the rocket motor attached in the back, this is a very recent picture. We expect in the coming months for the first time to turn on the rocket motor, and then over the next year to test the envelope of the spaceship itself before we fly any passengers. Key to doing that is the United States Federal Aviation Administration, which has to license us. So paced not only by the technology, we also have to demonstrate that, in fact, this can be a safe and reliable vehicle. We are very fortunate also that the state of New Mexico helped to finance a beautiful hangar facility in New Mexico, that once we complete the testing of this vehicle, we will be moving our operations to New Mexico, where we will have the passengers meet. They will get there a few days before they're scheduled to fly. They will undergo about 3 or 4 days of training as we prepare them for their exciting voyage. We intend to have a fleet at any one time of at least 2 or 3 spaceships. We're in the process now of already beginning the construction of the second spaceship, which shown here is the cabin. The spaceship itself, as well as the White Knight, is an all-composite design, which is a unique attribute from the company Scale Composite, who's constructing the initial vehicles. Virgin Galactic will actually be building all the subsequent vehicles. We have over 500 people signed up. What's really exciting about this is we hope in their first few years we will have flown off this initial backlog of 500 people. And what's interesting about the number 500 is since the beginning of the space age, about 530 people have flown into space. So we're hoping that within the first few years of operation that we will exceed that. And we hope to grow that number to many thousands. It's also interesting to view the kind of people that we have. I mean, they come from all walks of life. We have over 50 countries right now represented, signed up to fly. We got people who are adventurers, people who want to be the first in their country or their part of the world to have flown into space. And we got just people who, I think it's many in the audience, who just want the experience of what it would be like to be in space. One of the other things that we're doing on the spaceship is providing opportunity for some research. And sort of the cutaway picture here, we're providing small areas that research can in fact be flown along with passengers or in a dedicated fashion. And we actually have a contract with NASA to be conducting research aboard the spaceship. I'd like to talk about a second product line we recently announced this past year at Farnborough. This is actually a computer-generated picture. Instead of the spaceship sitting there in the middle of the White Knight, we have a launch vehicle we call Launcher One. It's a small launch vehicle. It's a 2-stage vehicle. We're taking advantage of the fact that we can actually carry it on an aircraft, so we don't have to deal with many of the challenges that occur with trying to fly out of the oftentimes very busy launch sites on the east and west coast of the United States. It gives us a lot of flexibility. We think it's also an exciting opportunity to be at the forefront of what we think is going to be a growing small satellite market. We've already got a significant initial interest in it. What's nice about our vehicle is it does provide a launch vehicle in a dedicated fashion. We expect to come in at under $10 million a launch, which we think is very affordable and very competitive for what would enable entrepreneurs who don't have hundreds of millions of dollars to launch satellites but can actually start new businesses with small satellites, as well as a lot of what we're seeing going on with CubeSats and new technologies and things that governments would like to explore, particularly in tight budgets. Lastly, I'd like to say at Virgin, we believe the sky is not the limit. And what we're doing, we think, is going to open up new frontiers and new opportunities. And again, I hope that many of you in the audience will have that great opportunity to fly in space someday, and hopefully with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. The truth is, I didn't raise up my hand because I was afraid of flying to space, but after your presentation, it's okay. Okay, ההרצאה הבאה שלנו האחרונה לסשן הזה היא הרצאה של
The next lecture will be from Nili Nendelblit on a special presentation of Israel's space ventures and small space companies. She is a graduate of the Hebrew University in Computer Studies and a PhD from the University of San Diego. She worked in a number of international high-tech companies and in the MBA program in Ben-Gurion University. Today she works in the Ministry of Industry and Trade in EastCert, the Israel-Europe R&D Directorate, especially in the area of transportation and nanotechnology. Thank you, Tammy, for the introduction. I would just like to say another word about ISERT, which is the goal is to advance collaborations between Israelis and Europeans with various government funding from both Israel and Europe. The presentation that I will be making will give a review of innovation in small to mid-sized enterprises in Israel. Israel has been active for about 30 years in the 80s in space when it launched its first satellite, Ofek 1, and it became the 7th country in the world that joined the prestigious club of countries that produce and launch satellites. Since the 80s, Israel has successfully launched 13 Israeli-made satellites and specialized for defense reasons and limitations in launch capabilities. As we heard yesterday, it specialized in building small observation satellites with very considerable remote sensor and photography capabilities. When we review the Israeli space capabilities, we see a number of central companies. They are the integrators of the building of the satellites, and then there are the companies that build the subsystems and operate and run the satellites. And I'm, of course, talking about the IAI, especially Mabat Space, Malam, Tamam, Elta, Elbit, Elup, Rafael, and a smaller number of companies which are all presenting here at the conference. But the innovation in these large companies and the innovation could not exist without an industry that provides all the components and new technologies that make it possible to build the satellites and make those achievements. And this innovation we find in a number of small to mid-sized companies that are deployed throughout Israel. We find them in the Israeli High-Tech Center here in Herzliya and in Tel Aviv, but many of them are also located in the periphery in Israel, both in the south and in the north, not only in the cities, but there are also companies that are located in kibbutzim and in moshavim. And many of these companies, like all the rest of the space industry in Israel, served in the past mainly the defense needs of Israel, and this is true today as well. But over the years, the industry has started to direct its capabilities to civilian needs as well in Israel and the world. One major example of the transition from the military industry to the civil industry is the Bayan Ofek satellite, the EROS satellites and ImageSat, which operates them, and the SMEs that I will mention here. They all serve the Israeli satellites, but many of them, as we will see, have managed to sell their wares abroad as well to the various space agencies. And the government programs, such as with the Ministry of Science, with the space industry and the Ministry of Industry and Trade, we encourage the companies to reach markets abroad. This slide It describes the space sector and the various business categories. And as I said, I will not be speaking today about those areas that are highlighted in yellow. Those are the areas that the larger companies deal with. Instead of that, I'll talk about those that are marked in green. In other words, those that supply components, the services that are provided to Israeli satellites, and the companies that provide added value to the final product. So I will divide up the companies according to the various segments. The first segment is that of infrastructures, and we see examples of companies that do make components, materials, and subsystems. I must note, of course, that the list of companies here is partial. It does not represent all the companies that are involved in the subject in Israel, and that is, of course, because of there isn't enough time, and I apologize in advance to those companies that were not included in the slides. And also, for the same reasons, I can only say a few words about each company, and I indeed invite all those who take an interest to come to me or to the companies themselves to learn more about them. So I'll start with Ramon Chips, a company that is named after Ilan Ramon, which specializes in the development and manufacture of electronic chips for space. It is one of the few companies outside the U.S. which specialize specifically in this niche. The company has already developed a processor together with a Swedish company of Geisler, which is currently being tested. It is involved in the development of another processor, RC64, and in recently two projects, FP7, the high-speed serial interface for space, and another one with LOP for the planning of a parallel supercomputer to do the processing on the satellite itself, for example, of hyperspectral pictures. Then we have the company called Cital Technology. It is an expert in serial databuses for avionics. It already supplies IP cores for NASA satellites, for example, the ESA LRO. And Cital is involved in transmitting the data. Netzer, another very interesting company, which produces sensors, shaft rotation sensors. This is it makes sensors based on an electric field as opposed to the optic or magnetic sensors currently on the market. And their technology makes it possible to measure without any contact of the object, and this, of course, eliminates wear and tear on the object. And its shaft rotation sensors are already in NASA's Robonauts. SCD, it's not a small company, it's a mid-sized company owned by two large companies, Elbit and Rafael, and it is considered in the world as one of the leaders in the development and manufacture of infrared detectors and laser diodes. This is for laser altimeters used in the BP Columba and ESA and JAXA, which will be sent to Mercury, and the laser will measure the Earth's various formations on the planet Mercury. And Ricor, this is a kibbutz company in Kibbutz En Harod. The name of the company is made up of two Hebrew words, Rik, which is a vacuum, and Kor, which is cold for cryogenic systems, and as its name, it develops cryogenic refrigerators or coolers, and which are miniature in size for miniature electro-optical systems, and these are used especially to cool infrared waves and of the SCD, as I mentioned earlier. The coolers are found in many missions in space, as you can see in the list on the bottom. All these are all the recent, and the most recent one is Curiosity of NASA, which landed on Mars. In the area of materials, I will briefly mention two companies. One is Actar, which developed a very innovative technology for super black coating that diverts the radiation of the sensors. It is much cleaner, environmentally speaking, than the environment and than the technologies used today, which emit pollutants. And it is used in the spectrograph in the James Webb telescope and many others that are mentioned on the slide. Chanita is another example of a materials company. It is also in a kibbutz, Chanita Coatings. In kibbutz Chanita, 75% of the company is owned by the kibbutz. Chanita produces and develops engineered polymer films and also multi-layer thermal insulations for vacuum neutralization. And two other systems. I'm still in the sector of space systems. Two companies which manufacture subsystems. Rokar, a small company that was acquired by BAE, a large company for defense equipment. Rokar develops and manufactures navigation and control systems for defense and space applications. For space, it manufactures LEO GPS systems and sequencing and control unit. And the Rokar systems will serve as the control system for Rafael's electroignition system for the Venus project, which is the French-Israeli cooperation, multispectral cooperation. And another company involved in subsystems in control and navigation is Alcilio, which develops and manufactures fiber optic gyros and inertial measurement units. I'll move on to the second system, which is the ground segment. The first company that I'll mention is Gilat Satellite Networks. It is exceptional in this because it is not a small company. It is a large and successful company. I think it is considered the second largest space company in Israel. But once again, I'm mentioning for the same reason that we mentioned earlier, because most of the discourse in Israel is around launching and building of satellites, and Gilat is involved in ground equipment for satellite-based communication. Its main product are VSATs, high-performance VSATs, very small aperture terminals, and they've been very successful with that. Another line that Gilat has become involved with through the purchase of the RaySat company, and that is solutions of satellite on the move, SOTMs, and these are mobile antennas that are placed on vehicles on the move. And Gilat has been involved mainly in the military market and moved into the civilian market. This is an example of a company of that nature, and is working very hard in the civil and commercial market, working with the new generation of satellites with the K-band network. Orbit, this is a company that provides tracking systems for critical mission applications. The company develops mobile tracking systems, and I saw that recently that one of some very important contracts recently, and it has visibility in the field. It has a large client base, and this includes many satellite operators and space agencies throughout the world, as you can see on the slide. AccuBeat is a very interesting company which is developing atomic clocks that are based on atom GPS rubidium atomic, and will supply 4 Galileo stations, apparently the only one, and it also is developing the nano atomic clock, which is intended for the ground segment, but in the future will be used in space too. The last company I will mention in the ground sector is Galileo from another direction. This is a company that develops simulators, software receivers, and indoor navigation for smartphones and wireless infrastructures for inside buildings where there's no GPS reception, and this enables continuous operation of the navigation system. In another business segment is the satellite service providers. The first is ImageSat. ImageSat deals with the operation of observation satellites and photography by means of 2 satellites that it owns, Eros satellites, and outside the United States it is apparently the only supplier that provides high resolution, less than a meter, satellite photography of less than a meter resolution, and it provides clients with control over the satellite photography when it is located over the area for which the company has paid. There's another company, Spacecom, a space communications company. I don't have a slide for it. I'll just say that it is a company that operates the Amos satellite, communication satellite, and leases out segments. Another business category is that of added value providers, those who develop software for remote processing for the end users, and I'll mention 4 companies in this context. The first is Windward. This is maritime analytics. It provides maritime analytics at any given moment. Photographs of ships at sea of very high quality. It is also the only company in the world that can analyze data from different sources, land, sea, and ground, and uses all the open sources of information and broadcasts from the ships to each other, as well as optical and SAR satellite images, and it has a great deal of experience working with the Navy. Yard is a company that develops sensing solutions in real time, especially when image quality has been corrupted because of poor visibility. LMY develops algorithms for geolocation from space, air, and ground, 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional, by merging data from all the sources, ground, air, and space. And I'll also mention GUARD, which it specializes in urban planning applications. It is involved in European collaboration together with Russia to develop the city planning applications. In the final category, I have called this Others, and I have indeed included a number of examples of individual initiatives or from groups of people who have come with experience from the army or from the industry, who are crazy about space, as it were, and seek to develop initiatives related to space. And they're involved in various areas, including education. I would like to briefly mention Effective Space Solutions, which is a company that is run by a former Mabat Space for space solars based on PV technology for commercial applications such as communications. There is NSL, also a small venture with a lot of professional experience from the AI seeking to develop new low-cost technologies for space missions. They have won a number of R&D projects, international projects throughout the world. One is in Europe, and this year they won the NASA Sphere competition for innovative ventures involving the use of inflating solar panels and antennas. I'll move ahead. There is Multimodis. Once again, these are all people, some of them you've seen them presenting here. I'd also like to mention from another direction, nonprofits. There is the Israeli Association for Nano Satellites. They are trying to lead projects in the area of nano satellites. They are working with high school students, including the development of algorithms, and I think their activities were also mentioned on the first day by the mayor of Herzliya, because a lot of the work is being done here in Herzliya in the Science Center. And I'd also like to mention Space IL, which is a venture of Israeli amateurs who competed in the Google Lunar X Prize competition to land an unmanned spacecraft on the moon. And after I conclude, Yanki Margalit will come up and say a few words about Space IL. And now, just to conclude, in this presentation, we just had a small sample of the innovation that we can see in small and mid-sized enterprises in Israel. Israel is known for its innovation and entrepreneurial spirit. And this is a slide where there's a quote from the last World Economic Column, which rated Israel number 3 in its innovative and entrepreneurship abilities. And this innovation is also a result of the high quality of research in Israel's academic institutions, as well as a result of the funding from the government. So I would like to invite all those from the foreign delegations who are interested in collaborating with this Israeli innovation to make contact with me for further details. My email is here on the screen, and you can also see further details on the site of ISERD and ISEG. And ISEG specializes in the collaborations with Europe in the context of Galileo. Thank you. Yanki Margalit. So we indeed have a little surprise. Yanki Margalit. We spoke today a lot about the transition from the venture capital funds to industry to commercial activity, and some of the activities in the United States are indeed carried out by people who were not in the past in the space industry. SpaceX, that is an entrepreneur who was involved with PayPal, an internet trading site or commercial site. And what connects, I think, all these things is this connection between entrepreneurship, the ability to see into the future, and all the things we talked about today. And I'm very happy to conclude this session with Yanki Margalit. As most of you know, is a very successful internet entrepreneur in the area of, in the company of Aladdin, which succeeded and was sold, and he won't talk about that. And Yanki, since then, I met with him at a number of junctures, and he is the typical entrepreneur who goes from one area to another, and today he is involved in the field of space with Space IL and also in many other areas as well.
Thank you very much. We have a dream. This is our dream. Imagine, this is our spaceship. The year is 2015, and we are landing on the moon. The first Israeli spaceship to land on the moon. Actually, I came here to say thank you, because you're not doing it alone. It all started by a dream of 3 young engineers who said, we want to go to the moon. And it was their dream, and they were able to somehow get the whole Israeli public behind that dream. The Israeli Academy, the Israeli industry, we got international supporters. NASA is supporting SpaceIL, and we believe that yes, in 2 to 3 years, we will be able to share this dream with everybody and take our first spaceship to the moon. Actually, we would like to invite you to join our trip even today. All you have to do right now is take out your smartphone, take a photo of this image, use your QR code, go to Facebook, and we will take your photo to the moon with us. This is the closest thing to eternity that I can guarantee to you. You know, things on the moon last for so many years. They told me that the footprints of the first astronauts on the moon will last for more than 10 million years. So we want to take your photos to the moon. We want to take us to the moon in a way. So if you just take your phone, photo it, go to Facebook, we would love to share the ride to the moon with you. And my last sentence here is going to be a big, big, big thank you to the Israeli Academy, to the Weizmann Institute, to the Technion, to the Tel Aviv University, to the Israeli industry, to the Israeli aircraft industry, to Rafael, to Elbit, Elop, many other companies who support us, to President Peres, our youngest volunteer, our President Shimon Peres, to 200 volunteers that are already with us, and to 20,000 Israeli kids, children, who are joining us on this way to the moon. I will be more than happy to stand here in 3 years and share the real photos from the moon once we landed. Thank you very much.
This concludes the morning session. I think we had
עם זה נסיים את
wonderful...
המושב הראשון. אני חושב ששמענו מצגות נפלאות, ונראה אתכם במושב הבא.